Welcome, everybody. My name is Jim Basker, and I'm president of the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History. And I want to welcome you all to the 8th annual presentation of the National History Teacher of the Year Award, an award that is co-sponsored by the History Channel, Preserve America, and the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History. Special thanks to the many VIPs who are here today, and especially to one of our guests of honor, Mayor Bloomberg. It is particularly appropriate that we meet here to honor the 2011 History Teacher of the Year, because Frederick Douglass Academy is one of the shining stars not only of the New York City public school system, but also of the Gilder Lehrman Institute's nationwide network of almost 1,500 affiliate schools. In fact, there are 118 of those affiliates in New York City alone. Frederick Douglass Academy, for those of you who are visitors today, has a college prep curriculum organized around history. Students can take as much as 4 years of American history here, almost as if they were majoring in history. 88% of those who take the AP exam in U.S. history here score 3 or higher, that's earning college credit. And more than 90% of the entire student body goes on to college. Indeed, this school has been awarded silver medal status by the U.S. News and World Report as one of the outstanding high schools in the country. The teachers, I should say, is in all of our affiliate schools nationwide, Frederick Douglass has access to more than a dozen different programs that Gilder Lehrman sponsors. The teachers here at Frederick Douglass can enroll in our program of summer seminars, 40 of them, led by great historians such as Eric Boner, Gordon Wood, Drew Gilpin Faust, and many others. They have access to the 60,000 rare documents in the Gilder Lehrman collection and to all the primary materials we produce, such as books, posters, and teacher resource boxes, as well as the extensive resources on our website. There are traveling exhibitions and distinguished historians who visit the school. The students have an active history club, and they participate in National History Day and in the Gilder Lehrman Civil War essay competition. They take field trips to historic sites and to museums such as the New York Historical Society. Some of them enroll in Saturday academies in history that we sponsor at the New York Historical Society and at the Museum of the City of New York. And every February, at the annual Frederick Douglass Book Prize dinner here in New York, a delegation of Frederick Douglass students are invited as guests to meet the winner and to mingle with historians, public officials, and philanthropists. Because of their deep background in American history, the students of Frederick Douglass Academy go on not only to succeed in college and in their careers, but to become some of the finest citizens in our city and our country could hope for. We have an extraordinary gathering of people here to honor the History Teacher of the Year. As I mentioned, the Gilder Lehrman Institute is proud to partner with the History Channel, who are generous in support of this award. Here to say a few words about the History Teacher of the Year on behalf of the History Channel is their Senior Vice President and Chief Historian, Dr. Libby O'Connor. Libby?
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, all of you. Particularly, I want to say, on behalf of the History Channel, how honored I am to be here at Frederick Douglass Academy for these awards, National History Teacher of the Year. You know, Frederick Douglass has always been a hero of mine, and I think he should be a hero for everyone concerned with education today. He loved learning so much, he was willing to face whipping, beating, and imprisonment in Antebellum, Maryland, where he was growing up, because it was illegal for enslaved African Americans to learn how to read. I know every student in this room knows that story, but just in case there's somebody who's out of high school who's in this auditorium who forgot how dedicated Frederick Douglass was to learning, I thought I should remind you. Douglass's biography is, I think, one of the inspirational stories in American history, and it illustrates just how valuable the study of the past can be to students of the present and in the future as well. The wonderful scholar and writer David McCullough says that history is great storytelling, and that's true. But the expert teaching of history is more than great storytelling. When a talented professional teaches history, his or her students are learning reading, writing and researching skills, critical thinking, perspective and analysis, and citizenship. And yes, thought-provoking and engaging stories that make up the composite narrative of humankind. They're learning those stories, but they're also learning all of these life skills that are so important to future employment, to just future engagement as a citizen. That's why we at the History Channel are proud to support this important award, recognizing great teachers of our nation with Gilder Lehrman Institute and Preserve America. Congratulations to Stacy Hoeflich on her excellent work at John Adams School in Alexandria, Virginia. I'm particularly impressed to learn that her students use opera to convey the rich stories of Virginia history, employing primary sources, very important, primary sources as a fundamental aspect of their research. I know that Thomas Jefferson is one of the historical figures that her students study, and if Mr. Jefferson were here, I'm sure he'd give a rousing huzzah to Stacy Hoeflich for her wonderful accomplishments as a history teacher who makes history every day. Thank you.
Our other partner in sponsoring this award is Preserve America, which is an initiative of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. We are honored to have here today, representing the Advisory Council, its Vice Chairman, the Distinguished Service Professor of History at Rutgers University, and I must add, a valued member of the Gilder Lehrman Advisory Board, Dr. Clement Price.
Thank you for your applause. Let me just say, I've known of this high school for years. There's an affiliation between this high school and American History High School in Newark, New Jersey. And your fame precedes my visit. And from what I've seen today, well deserved. It's great to be here. So let me bring greetings from the Advisory Council on History Preservation. I want to enthusiastically congratulate Stacy Hoeflich on this remarkable honor. She now stands on the shoulders of a special group of citizen educators whose work within the classroom enlivens the past for young citizens and settlers. Because of her work, their path to the future will be brightly lit. The Advisory Council has been a partner with Gilder Lehrman since the inception of the National History Teacher of the Year Award in 2004. We have done so through a successful program that we administer at the White House, the Department of the Interior, and other partners called Preserve America. Preserve America encourages communities, volunteer organizations, educators, governmental agencies, businesses, and especially private citizens to explore and enjoy our heritage, or should I say, our multiple heritages. So, on behalf of the Council and its Chairman, Wayne Donaldson, we would like to thank and congratulate this year's honoree. Additionally, let me just add that we thank and congratulate Gilder Lehrman, Mayor Bloomberg, and other distinguished partners, as well as those who love the past, love the memories of our past. We want to share their passion with you. Thank you very much.
We're turning now to introduce the winner herself. I could tell you about how almost 600 nominations were received nationwide, and how those 50 state winners were chosen, and how from them Stacy Hoeflich of John Adams Elementary School was chosen the national winner. I could tell you how she teaches fourth grade with verb and imagination, and gets her fourth graders occasionally to write and perform operas based on stories from history. She serves as an advisor to the George Mason Center for History and New Media, and much more about her stunning credentials and accomplishments. It is now my pleasure to introduce Mayor Bloomberg, who, as most of you know, began his business career in 1966 at Salomon Brothers, and then founded in 1981 his own very successful financial news and information company, Bloomberg LP, which employs now 11,000 people around the world. In 2001, he was elected the 108th mayor of New York City. During his time as mayor, he has made a big impact in a wide number of areas: crime reduction, public health, support for the arts and culture, revitalization of the waterfront, strong economic policies. But perhaps none of his priorities has been higher than education, as witnessed by the fact that since 2005, his educational reforms have raised graduation rates by 40%. Some of us call him the education mayor, and I think he has proven that by taking time from his hectic schedule to join us today. I'm proud to present Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Gilder, National History Teacher of the Year 2011. Stacy Hoeflich. Now, I know Dick Gilder. I've known him for 30-odd years, and I can just tell you he is one of the most generous, nice guys you'll ever meet. And he can teach you a lot, but he would never be Teacher of the Year. You really like Rebecca and Alan, both Dick and I know firsthand what a difference a good history teacher can make for students. I remember at Medford High School in Medford, Massachusetts, I graduated there in 1960. So in my senior year, I had a history teacher, Mr. Lally. He's only one of the two teachers that I remember from high school. My English teacher, I remember as well. And he made a difference that he opened my eyes to what history could be, and it somehow or other connected all of what we had studied with the real world. Mr. Lally talked about his aunt, for those of you, the older ones here will remember, who went every morning to get in line for the Sacco Vanzetti trial. For those of you that remember Sacco and Vanzetti, he had a professor who was in Sarajevo when Archduke Ferdinand was shot, and told stories about that. And I, for the first time, realized the difference between just reading something in a history book and trying to understand what it meant, why it happened, and what the lesson is for the rest of us. Like Stacy, he really made a difference. He brought history out of the textbooks and into the real world. And everybody says that Stacy really does that with passion. Mr. Lally's passion was contagious. I caught it. And he made me a better student, ideas, and eager to understand and communicate them. And although the world has changed a lot back then, some of you in the back will think that was when dinosaurs rolled the earth, but 1960 wasn't that long ago. Passion, I think, is still the most important ingredient in engaging students. I think we all know that today more than ever. The pathway to a brighter future for our children really does run through the classrooms. And that pathway, great teachers like Stacy are the guides. They're the ones that give those of us that go to school the opportunity to be in charge of our own destiny and to participate in the great American dream and to enjoy all of the things that young men and women have fought for the last 235 years, that all the great leaders in this country, Dr. Martin Luther King, who was a ceremony in Washington for a couple of days ago, all of the freedoms that everybody has fought for, we stand on their backs. And we've got to remember that it is our obligation to make a better world for our children. And one of the ways to do that is to salute outstanding teachers like Stacy, because it does send a message about the values that we place on their work. It is very fitting that we're hosting this ceremony here, not just because New York is where these ceremonies began back in 2004, not just because Frederick Douglass Academy has been a partner with the Gilder Lehrman Institute for nearly 10 years. I think it's also fitting because the great American for whom this school is named had some outstanding teachers too. Teachers who risked a lot to make sure that he had an education. And when Frederick Douglass was growing up, some feared, with good reason, that he teaching him would make him yearn for freedom. The good news is, it did, and our world is a better place because his passionate teachers were willing to help him succeed. His teachers helped change the course of history for the better. And that reminds us that great history teachers like Stacy don't just teach about the past, they shape our future. So Stacy, it is my honor to present you with a well-deserved award, which somebody will presumably hand me. Here it is.
So I'm way too tall for this. Can you hear me back there? Yeah. Great. Before I actually begin what I officially wrote, I have two disclaimers. Number one, I talk a lot and I write a lot, but I don't usually talk from what I've written, so it might not work very well. And, well, I forgot the other disclaimer. Okay. Oh, I know the other one. I'm in this surreal place for a little bit. I feel like I'm at an Oscar ceremony. And if I talk for too long, the orchestra might swell, and I might be cut off for my remarks. So if I forget to mention anybody, I'm really sorry. I'm going to blame on the orchestra. It's down here. Okay? I want to begin by saying thank you. I want to thank Mr. Gilder. I want to thank Dr. Basker from Gilder Lehrman, and Dr. O'Connell from History Channel, and Dr. Fergus here from Preserve America. They're the three sponsoring organizations. I want to thank Mr. Bloomberg, Mayor Bloomberg, for coming and for speaking. And I want to thank the Frederick Douglass Academy for hosting the event. I'm honored to be here. Rebecca and Alan, I want to thank you for coming all this way and for writing such very kind words about me, and for your parents who are traveling all the way here with you. And for my family and friends who have come a long way to be here to support me, I want to thank you as well. Okay, so here's the prepared part. I'm honored and humbled to be standing here before this audience, accepting a title as grand as National History Teacher of the Year. I was actually struck speechless when I first heard that I was chosen as a national winner, and as anyone who knows me will tell you, that's a virtual impossibility. But when my ability to recreate articulate thoughts returned, my thoughts took an interesting trip down memory lane, which I want to share with you, and actually I think will echo what Mayor Bloomberg said. When I was a junior in high school, I had an AP US history teacher who used to stop at nothing to get us teenagers to engage in her class. I have a distinct memory of Mrs. Collodi standing on top of her desk in the dark with the flickering light from a film strip. Raise your hand if you actually know what a film strip is. Wow! With the reflection of a film strip on her gold-rimmed glasses. There's an American flag behind her, and she was exuberantly bellowing about Teddy Roosevelt, her favorite president. And my only thought at the time was that this woman was crazy. Straight up crazy. Good crazy, but genuinely off her rocker. I mean, who gets that excited about a dead president? Ever since I began the process of completing this application for this National History Teacher of the Year award, Mrs. Collodi has become an almost daily part of my reflection on my own social studies teaching. While I was in high school, the Daughters of the American Revolution honored Mrs. Collodi with their National Outstanding Teacher of American History Award. And winning this prestigious award has helped me fulfill a dream that I didn't know that I actually had, which is, with this award, the larger community of historians and teachers is telling me that I have reached the quality and influence of Mrs. Collodi. And in return, I'm able to offer homage to a mentor teacher whose example has undeniably influenced my desire to teach history, my knowledge of American history, and my skill in delivering history instruction. The interesting thing I think about Mrs. Collodi is that while we were all sure that she was, let's say, wired a little bit differently, we all fought to get into her classes. She taught U.S. history, but she also taught an elective on Vietnam, for which she had created all of the curriculum herself. And that elective was the first to fill. Only seniors could take it, and in New Jersey at the time, seniors were not required to take any history at all. So it was a full class. Listening to Rebecca and Alan write about their experiences in my social studies class, I can't help but remember being a student myself in Mrs. Colodi's class. For her, history was alive. She wanted us to engage in that living, breathing story and to recognize that we were already part of the story. And further, she wanted us to take responsibility for the nature and the quality of our participation in that story. This message, which was communicated clearly without ever being actually articulated, is exactly what I learned from Mrs. Colodi back in high school, and it's what I strive daily to impart to my students. Though the state of Virginia and my superintendent may object, I submit that it would be fine if my students walked out of my class not knowing who Pocahontas really is. If they can't remember that the Susan Constant and the Godspeed and the Discovery were the three ships which brought John Smith and his group of English colonists to Virginia, even though they boarded the Discovery last week, that's okay. And if they don't know where Comco is, House's Village, it doesn't really matter. I can't remember any of the particulars of the Tet Offensive. I don't really know what happened when Saigon fell in 1975. I'll be honest with you. What I remember is much more important than that. I remember participating in a draft and listening to my fellow students talk about what they were going to do when they had been drafted. I was not drafted. I remember sitting and listening to a Vietnam veteran who had never before spoken out loud about his experiences in Vietnam talk about being dropped into Cambodia behind enemy lines with no dog tags and all of the serial numbers scratched off of his weapon so that they wouldn't know who he was if he were to be killed. I remember having a homework assignment where I had to call up a veteran and tell them thank you and listen to what they had to say. And finally, I remember traveling to Washington, D.C. to see the wall and bawling my eyes out because for the first time I actually understood what a memorial I was being taken to see was in fact memorializing. So that's what I learned from Mrs. Colodi. I learned from Mrs. Colodi that citizenship is complicated and that the citizenry doesn't always agree on the best course of action. I learned that people have difficult choices to make in the real world and that they are responsible for the consequences of those choices, even if that means living the rest of your life in a different country or dying in a country that you never knew existed because the government tells you to. I learned that society can be mean and remarkably unfair once it has made up its collective mind about something, and that entire groups of people can be discriminated against or hurt by the very people who are supposed to be their most intimate communities. I learned that I have the power to help right wrongs that society inflicts, and that as one person, I can ease suffering and heal hurts just by saying words as simple as, welcome home. I learned that it's never too late to say thank you. These are the lessons that I learned in high school with Patty Colodi, and these are the lessons that I try to teach Rebecca and Alan and all of my students. I want them to be prepared to live in the complicated world we live in today, engaging fully and with empathy, tolerance, and compassion. More so, I want them to take ownership of their experience in this world, figure out how to negotiate obstacles in it, and ultimately thrive in it. I may not have actually stood up on my desk yet, and we definitely don't have film strips anymore, but every day in my classroom, I find myself unintentionally channeling Patty Colodi. I work to find compelling primary resources to give students first-hand access to different points of view from the time, just like Ms. Colodi brought in living veterans from Vietnam to tell about their experiences. We investigate John Smith's 1612 map of Virginia, and we investigate a woodcut depicting Nat Turner's rebellion, political cartoons from the Richmond Times-Dispatch advocating active resistance to Brown versus Board of Ed in 1954. I take the students on a capstone field trip to Jamestown and Yorktown so that they can see what it is that we've been learning about, just like Mrs. Colodi took us down to Washington, D.C. to see the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. We engage in real historical discourse, and yes, they are 9 and 10. We ask questions, we look for answers, we identify problems, and we evaluate solutions. We recognize shades of gray and try to differentiate between different points of view. These are the skills that my students will need as they grow up to become active citizens in their community. Pocahontas aside. These are the skills that I learned from Mrs. Bloomberg. So, thank you to everyone here for recognizing my work to equip my students with the skills that they need, and thank you to Mrs. Bloomberg.